call to order the Town Board regular meeting for June 10th, 2019, 7 p.m. Ms. Eicher, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker.
Here.
Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Mr. Bennett, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. The agenda is approved unanimously as presented. Moving on to item 4, I have a proclamation this evening for the Cattle Barons Ball Day. Whereas the 27th Annual Northern Colorado Cattle Barons Ball, September 21st, 2019, will take place at the site of the brand new Rain Dance Golf Club in Windsor, Colorado. And whereas this elegant and lively event will draw in more than 900 prominent individuals from the Colorado business and philanthropic community, and everyone who has ever been touched by cancer will be touched by the generous outcomes of this prestigious event. And whereas money raised supports the Society's mission to free the world from pain and suffering of cancer by directly helping people in our community by providing information and support, free lodging and transportation, in addition to currently funding more than $8 million in Colorado research grants. And whereas the Cattle Barons Ball is one of the premier cancer fundraising events, both locally and nationwide. Since this event's humble beginnings, more than $8 million has been raised to support all efforts to win the war against cancer. The mission is to save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a whole world without cancer. Grateful for past, present, and future support from Northern Colorado's remarkable community leaders, top corporations, and incredible volunteers who make the celebration possible and create measurable impacts in the fight against cancer year after year. And whereas this will be an elegant, tented affair with amazing decor featuring a cocktail reception followed by a gourmet steak dinner, as well as silent and live auctions, a pledge drive, honorary tributes, entertainment, and dancing. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of Windsor, Colorado, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2019 as Cattle Barons Ball Day, and the opportunity for us to positively impact lives affected by cancer. As the mayor, I will also call upon the citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to join the American Cancer Society to help save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a world without cancer. I don't believe is there somebody this evening who represents the proclamation? I didn't think I saw them, but anyway, thank you. With that, moving on to item 6, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
We missed item 5 on the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. The most important one tonight. Item 5, Chief Klemick, will you please come forward and give the presentation of our Officer and Civilian of the Year?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Mayor and board members, I thank you for having us here tonight. This is something we've honored an Officer of the Year for many years with the Optimist Club. I can't think of a year we haven't done it. Unfortunately, up until just recently, we haven't kept a a stat of the winners over the years. So we were able to go back and piece that back together and back to 2005 with all the lists. So we have a plaque now at the PD that will list all the award winners as we move forward in the years to come. I'm going to start with Sergeant Lopez, only because this is a reoccurring award that we've had before. Aaron, would you please come down here? Aaron's been with us, right at 10 years?
Almost 13 years.
Almost 13 years.
Boy, time flies.
13 years one time. So Aaron's been an integral part of our department for a long time. He's always been a go-getter and one of those people you can always rely upon for any task that you ask him to take on. In fact, you have to be careful not to ask him to do too many things because he'll overwhelm himself. And unfortunately, will leave his family home while he's at work. Aaron started our traffic unit this year. He was the first one in charge of that, setting it up. And with the traffic unit also comes our CSOs and the crossing guards, which is probably something that one of our bane of our existence is dealing with the crossing guards because it's such a difficult position to maintain and to keep it staffed. But Aaron took on these tasks along with many other tasks over the years. This year, unlike past years, the nominees for the Office of the Year have come from the staff themselves. In the past, it was just selected by the command staff would take nominations and then select the person to receive the award. This year, it came from the nominations from fellow employees and people that they work alongside with. Aaron was selected, and I can't think of a better person to represent the police department in winning this award. So, Aaron, I'm not going to read this. Susanna and Carol told me I had to, but I'm not. It basically just reiterates all the work you've done. This award was yours and given to you by the Optimist, but I wanted this to be presented to the town board for them to witness also. So, Aaron, thank you for everything that you've done. I asked him to give a speech and he said he would.
I appreciate the offer. Thank you very much.
She's coming down to get your picture.
The chief on there.
Okay, this award, the Civilian of the Year, is the first of its kind. We've never done this before, and Susanna, would you please come forward? Again, as with the Office of the Year, we solicited the entire staff for nominations. Susanna was selected, and rightly so. She is, this year alone, has taken on a number of tasks that require a lot of extra brain power that most of us would get frustrated with and throw our hands up. Our E-Force has been with us, our RMS system, for some time, and Susanna has taken on a challenge to work with us, the officers, E-Force, and working to getting our records to be sufficient enough that we can rely on the data. And when the courts put E-Force into existence, she assisted with that process of blending the two and making sure we can both work together. She's taken on training of the staff, which is difficult because we've had this E-Force project for how many years? 2000. And so most of the people, the guys and gals that have worked here for a while have become ingrained in doing it, and in some cases doing it wrong. And so we've had to untrain ourselves in how we're putting the data in. And Susanna's taken on that role of training and working with us on a monthly basis now. So Susanna, congratulations.
Her husband from the student.
Oh, really? Out there?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay. You ready to move on then to item 6?
We're ready when you're
Have we
ready.
completed everything here? So again, we want to thank you both for all your hard work, for all that you do. You are what helps make Windsor that kind of place that all of our citizens can be proud of. So thank you each and every day. What you do, sometimes you might feel it does go unnoticed, but believe me, it is recognized by all of us, and we want to just thank you again. Moving on then to item 6, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. I have no update since our last meeting.
Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
Yeah, the Parks and Recreation Board on Tuesday went on a bus tour to look at potential future projects. When we get into the budgetary season, obviously we have lots of great ideas and things we can do in our community, and but we have to prioritize those and determine what we can and can't do, many times based on finances. So it was able to, I thought it was cool to really get feet on the ground and go out and look where the projects would be and visualize it. And putting that together with the survey information that'll be coming down, that'll really help us determine how to go forward. On the Poudre River Trail Corridor, there's been some talk for a while about the connection on the west side of town into Timnath, Fort Collins area. There will be a tunnel under I-25, but the real hangup has been with some gaining access to land in between Windsor and Timnath. And Larimer County did sign an agreement in the last week or so, so it looks like that hurdle has been overcome. So the trail may be 3 to 5 years away, but it looks like some of the major hurdles have been overcome, and so it would take the over 20 miles of trail that we have through Greeley, Weld County, and Windsor and connect it westward into some of the other communities. So that's some exciting news. And then we are looking at some of the local jurisdictions have different rules for e-bikes. We don't allow any gas-powered vehicles on the trails, but e-bikes are generally pedal assisted with a battery. They're not loud, and they're generally give people who may not be able to get on the trail accessibility. So with Greeley having different rules than Weld County and having different rules than Windsor, we're working together to try to come up with some consistent rules so as people ride through the various communities. That's all, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
Water and Sewer Board meets this Wednesday morning at 6:30 a.m.
Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
Well, the Chamber of Commerce has had a lot going on recently, so I want to tell you about some upcoming events and some recent activities. There were the big kickoff for the summer at Boardwalk Park was on Thursday night. It was a great turnout. Freddy's Frozen Custard and Steak Burgers provided 3,000 ice cream sandwiches free of charge to all attendees. So we want to give a shout out to Freddy's for donating those to the town and the chamber. Second of all, there were 3 new businesses that had ribbon cuttings on Thursday and Friday. The first one was Cell State Rogue Realty. They're on Main Street, as well as Windsor Lake Coffee and Windmill Homes, all 3 of which had ribbon cuttings between Thursday and Friday. There are a couple other activities I wanted to talk about. There's 3 new businesses that joined the chamber: Edward Jones, Greeley Subaru, and Cell State Rogue Realty, like I just mentioned, that we had a ribbon cutting for. The library is going to be hosting the chamber for 3 different focus groups coming up later this month. June 14th, there's one at 12 noon, one on June 20th at 10 a.m., and June 25th at 12 noon. Those are focus groups designed to get feedback from the community as far as the future of the Chamber of Commerce is considered. So with the new director that we have on board for the last month, he's going to be there. The library is just facilitating a place for those focus groups to be held again, June 14th, 20th, and 25th. With that, I believe that is, oh, I have one more thing. For those of you that would want to get to meet the new chamber president and CEO, he is having a meet and greet this Friday night at 5 o'clock. If you register, I guess there's a free drink. That's all I know. I don't know if that's just to chamber members, et cetera, but that is sponsored by the chamber, but is not paid for by the chamber. The chamber can't afford to pay for alcohol on Friday night for everybody, but that is an opportunity to have a meet and greet with the new president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce.
At a High Hops.
At High Hops, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. High Hops at 5 o'clock on Friday evening.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Well, the Great Western Trail Authority was hoping to be opening bids for the completion of the trail between Severance and Eaton this week, but it hasn't worked out because there is a property line dispute just east of Severance. Adjacent property owner is claiming he owns a portion of where we were going to put the trail. We feel we're in the right, but we've retained an attorney to try to get this all sorted out and hopefully get going again this year. But you know, when you start talking legal issues, possible court visits, you never know where it's going to wind up. The Windsor Housing Authority, they're having ongoing weekly planning meetings with architect and the contractor for the Golden Meadows Senior Citizen Development, and so they're working through that and getting that planning underway for hopefully construction beginning next summer of 2020. Also, they discussed the proposal for Severance and Windsor to combine housing authorities. And it went to a vote, and the Housing Authority Board voted not to join with Severance at this time. They feel there's just too much going on in Windsor at this time to keep track of. But they did keep the option open for in the future to possibly help Severance get started and combine the two boards. That's all.
Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board, Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. The Library Board will meet later this month, but they did have a kickoff meeting on June 5th for their new strategic planning effort. I think they're trying to pull together about, I think in total 30 people perhaps from the community and also community leaders to guide them in a strategic planning study that will take place over the next 5-6 months, I believe. I also believe it's being led by the same woman that helped the town go through their strategic planning effort. I will probably be involved in that to some extent. I think you may be as well. If anyone out in the community is interested, I don't know how the library is staffing that strategic planning group, but if you check their website, it'd probably give you instruction on how to be involved if you'd like to be. The Planning Commission was fairly light scheduled. There's no communications to the board from the Planning Commission. The only issue that was reviewed was the conditional use grant at Highland Meadows that we will see tonight on our agenda. Thank you.
Okay. I have Downtown Development Authority and North Front Range MPO. Downtown Development Authority does not meet again until the 19th of this month. MPO did meet on June 6th, last Thursday. I think two main things out of that meeting was, first of all, we had a presentation from the CDOT Executive Director, Shoshana Liu, who presented us with kind of like the future of what and the vision of where CDOT is headed and what they're looking like and what they hope to look like in the near future. In the next 6 months, they're going to visit all of the counties, and they hope to get a lot of feedback from citizens because they're really going to relook at all of their current plans to determine, and they want to bring them all together in the conversation instead of independently. A more holistic approach when they look at transportation. They want to include multimodal and transit and all of that, and freight and rail all in one conversation instead of separate conversations. So after the summer, we should get a report back, and we should see have a better direction of where they're going to be headed and what they're going to be focused on. The other report I think that we all received was, of course, the I-25 project did secure not only the necessary $250 million that we were hoping for, they actually secured $310 million. So we exceeded the amount, which will now do the complete full build out of actually segments 7 and 8 to the 3+1. So now that was all great news. So now we still are looking for funding though to complete 5 and 6, but good news on our portion, because in the Windsor section we are section 7. So, and that's the first section that they of course are going to be working on, and hopefully will be breaking ground sometime in September. So that concludes my report. Moving on to item 7. Item 7 is the portion of our agenda this evening, which is open to the public invited to be heard. Did we have anybody who signed up this evening? Okay. Did we have anybody who wished to speak to the board on a non-agenda item? This would be the opportunity. Okay, seeing none, we will jump to our consent calendar. Our consent calendar this evening consists of 4 items. Is there a motion for the consent calendar?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar passes unanimously. Moving on to item C, board action. Our first item this evening is the presentation of the 2018 annual audit report. Presentation from Randy Watkins, who's the partner with the ACM LLC. But Mr. Moyer is going to start us off. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. In your packet is quite a bit of information concerning the 2018 audit. We had the audit wrap-up document and also the report itself. As you mentioned here tonight, to present this report, behind me is Randy Watkins, a partner with Anton Collins and Mitchell, that is our independent auditor. So with that, I will turn it over to Randy and he will take over.
Thank you, Dean. Good evening. Actually, before I started, until I saw the agenda, I didn't realize there was going to be an acknowledgement of the Cattle Barons Ball, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but my wife and I actually chaired that for the last 2 years. So Warren and Julie Yoder are doing it this year, and we're really excited about what they're doing with it. So I just want to express my appreciation for your support. So as Dean mentioned, there are a couple of documents. The first one that I'll go through is the audit wrap-up document, and it's really just the final required communication from the firm to you guys, kind of sharing with you how the audit went. We'll skip past the cover letter and discussion outline and start with the page that says status of our audit. We have substantially completed our audit. We're done. The pencils are down. The financial statements are virtually complete. Really the last act is your approval of the financial statements, and then we'll also get an audit management representation letter. The audit was performed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States. In the past, you have been subject to the single audit. This year, you fell just below the threshold for federal expenditures, so you were able to avoid having to have the full single audit done this year. The objective of our audit was to obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. That just means we don't test every single transaction. We test samples of transactions and draw conclusions from that. The scope of the work was substantially unchanged from what was earlier communicated to you. Our planned audit approach did not change as a result of the audit work that we did. We do expect to issue an unmodified opinion. That's commonly referred to as a clean opinion, so that's what you're looking for. There is other information contained in the annual report, the management's discussion and analysis, introductory section, statistical section. We don't issue an opinion on all that information. We do read it and make sure that it's materially consistent with the financial statements, but we don't issue an opinion on that. And then the last 2 bullets, we did receive everything that we asked for. Dean and his crew do an amazing job in preparing for us and helping us get through the audit. It's not, it's kind of what used to be thought of as sort of a sleepy town in northern Colorado. You guys have a lot of really cool stuff going on, and so it's not the easiest audit to get through. So for them to get us through it, it's been great. This year, there were no new accounting pronouncements that impacted you. A few years ago, we went through the pension reporting standard. OPEB would have been effective for this year, but we're not aware of any plans, either formal or informal, that the town is subject to. So that new OPEB standard was not necessary for this year. Primary areas of focus, we conduct what's called a risk-based audit approach. So these are the areas that we spent the majority of our attention. The higher risk areas really are anything that's governed by complex accounting rules, if it has significant dollar amounts, if there's some compliance requirements around it. Those are the types of things that we consider when we're identifying the areas where we'll spend more time. On page 5, the results of our audit, there were some adjusting journal entries resulting from the audit. Those will be attached to the management's discussion and analysis. Nothing out of the ordinary, but we did have some adjusting entries. The financial statements, we assist with the preparation of the financial statements, and we do complete a disclosure checklist, just ensuring that everything that's necessary is included in the footnotes and that all items are disclosed. Internal control over financial reporting on page 6. As part of the audit, we obtain an understanding of the control environment, really for the purpose of designing the audit approach, not for the purpose of expressing an opinion. So we don't express an opinion on the internal control environment, but if we do find any control deficiencies, we do categorize them into 1 of 3 categories. Control deficiency is the lowest level, just meaning there should have been a control and there's not. Material weakness is one where we believe that the control is severe enough that it could result in a material misstatement. We did have one significant deficiency. Actually, I'm sorry, we didn't have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We did have one control deficiency. You do have a good policy around credit card transactions, but when we were doing the test work over that, there were a few instances where the actual transactions weren't reviewed by the direct supervisor. There are other controls in place that kind of mitigate that whole thing, but we did identify a few issues with that. I usually clear the room when we start talking about accounting.
You always have this effect on people?
Yeah, don't let it bother me anymore. It doesn't bother me anymore. I've had a few people fall asleep on my too, but. Other required communications. I already mentioned there were no changes to the planned audit strategy. Other information, as part of the audit, we do make inquiries of town board members, but nothing came out of those inquiries that we believe warrants your attention. We didn't require any specialized skills to perform the audit. We're not aware of any consultations with other accountants. We review all the relationships that exist with the town and other components and other organizations around and didn't identify any issues there. We didn't have any disagreements with management. No significant difficulties were encountered during the audit. No other matters that we think you should be aware of. And then, as I mentioned, we get a rep letter at the end of the audit. Independence communications, we are required to be independent in both fact and appearance, and this is just an affirmative statement to that effect. And then there's a few standards that are becoming effective over the next few years. GASB 75 was effective for this year. Asset retirement obligations will be effective for next year. I don't believe that that'll impact you. It would really be any legal requirement for you to remediate property, and we'll evaluate it, but I really don't think it'll affect you. Fiduciary activities may have an impact, but it probably won't be very dramatic. And most of the rest of these probably won't impact you. But we will evaluate. Leases comes up in a couple years. We'll evaluate all these as they kind of come up and work with management and make sure that we have the right steps in place. So. Any questions on the wrap document before I go into the financial statements? And I typically go through these pretty quick. So skipping to page 15 in the PDF.
I believe you do have a question.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry, sir. Just a question on the results of the audit. You referenced that I think your opinion would have an attachment with those corrected misstatements.
The management rep letter will, yes.
And there's a follow-on that says there's also a schedule of uncorrected misstatements, which makes it sound like, yikes, why would there be uncorrected?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So occasionally we'll identify an insignificant difference between a supporting schedule and a trial balance number. So it's a really small number. It's not significant enough to impact. Materiality is defined as anything that would impact the reader's position on the financial statements. And it's small enough from a quantitative standpoint or even from a qualitative standpoint that, with management's approval, we don't make the adjustment. So effectively, we share it with management and say, there's an error, it's a small error, it's not significant to us, do you want to post it or not? And typically, it's not posted. So, and a lot of times, it's an unlocated difference and it's not significant. Okay. So.
Then I guess a question on that credit card transaction. I think what you said was there were other mechanisms in place that would address the concern you had, but I guess should we in fact change our procedures, Dean, to?
Oh, yeah, I look at those credit card statements every month when we pay them. It comes through we have quite a few of them. I don't remember how many, but quite a few cards. And, you know, we are to have the supervisor, department head, and then me check them before we pay them. And apparently we missed a couple.
Yeah, your policy's fine. It was
The
just,
procedures are there.
yeah, and it wasn't pervasive. It was a handful of individual situations, so it wasn't, we didn't believe it elevated to a pervasive position, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, in the financial statements, we'll skip to, I don't know how it's organized for you, but it's the 15th page of the PDF, and it's our audit opinion, so it'll be on our letterhead. The first paragraph just describes what we audited, the management's responsibilities, that second section. The third section's our responsibility, kind of describes all the things that I talked about in the wrap document. Our opinion is actually on the bottom of that page and just tells you that we were in fact able to satisfy ourselves that the financial statements are accurate in accordance with GAAP. The long paragraphs on the next page talk about the MD&A, the required supplementary information, the stuff that we don't issue an opinion on, but we do read, and then other information like the budgetary comparison information, combining non-major fund statements, those types of things. We do actually reconcile those to the statements and issue an in relation to opinion on those. So that's what that's all telling you. Going to page 33 in the PDF is the first page of the financial statements. In between is the management's discussion and analysis. I would encourage you to read it, but I'm not going to go through it tonight. It does have a lot more color around why things happen. There's 3 years of data in there versus, or I'm sorry, 2 years of data in there versus just a single year presentation. So the first page that we'll look at is the statement of net position. This is the balance sheet basically for the town as a whole. It includes all governmental and business type activities. Really all I would highlight here, because there weren't really any major changes, what we typically look at and share is, you know, unrestricted net position, that bottom second to last line. That's the amount of your net position that's available to satisfy the ongoing operations of the organization. In other words, it's not restricted for anything else. You have roughly 9 months worth of annual expenditures in that, which is very healthy. So it's a good position to be in.
What page are you on, by the way?
19 of the document. It's
19 of the 267?
This is actually the financial statement.
No,
So it's
no,
33 of the
second.
PDF. I'm not sure how it's organized. At the top, it would say,
Yeah, it's page 115 in the packet.
Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't have the same packet in front of me. What's page 33 mean? Yeah, so at the bottom of that page, you see there's 21.5 million in unrestricted net position for the governmental activities, and then about 31.1. It's roughly 9 months worth of annual expenditures when you look at the next page, which we'll go to next. Just something we look at, usually an indicator of financial stability or health. On the next page, the statement of activities, this is the income statement for the town as a whole. It's organized between the individual functions or programs of the town up above, and then general revenues that are intended to offset some of those shortfalls. So here you can see about 33 million in total expenditures for governmental activities and $8 million in business type activities. So I was off. You have a couple years worth in the business type activities, but in other words, you've got enough in your unrestricted net position to manage the organization on an ongoing basis. Year over year on the next page, which would be page, I'm just going
117 for us.
Yeah, 117. The net position for the governmental activities improved by about 21.4 million. For the business type activities, about 18.1 million. And then for your component unit, about 482,000. So in all cases, you improved the net position during the year. The next several pages are the governmental fund financial statements. So the balance sheet is the next page. This is the governmental funds. It's on, everything up until this point has been on the full accrual economic resources measurement focus. Now we're on the modified accrual current financial resources measurement focus. So you won't see any long-term assets or liabilities or deferred inflows or deferred outflows on these. And then there's a reconciliation on the next page, page 1718, showing how you get from the governmental funds to the net position in the governmental activities, so the government-wide financial statements. The next page, the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances is the income statement for the individual funds. Here again, I looked at the unrestricted net position and compared that to total expenditures. You're at about 9 months for that as well, so in great shape. And in every one of your funds, you improved the fund balance during the year. Another reconciliation to take you from the fund financial statements to the government-wide financial statements, just showing all those reconciling items. And then you're into the proprietary fund financial statements, and these are on the exact same basis and measurement focus as the government-wide. So there's no reconciling items. These will look identical if you take that totals column and take it to the first page. The third page of the proprietary fund financial statements, the statement of cash flows. So everything's been accrual to this point. Now you're seeing the sources and uses of cash for the individual enterprise funds, organized between operating activities, non-capital financing, and then capital and related financing activities. There's investing in there as well. Overall, your cash position in the water fund decreased by about $256,000, but you improved it in the storm drainage and in total. So, and a lot of that's just through the pooled cash, how that gets kind of allocated. So, in the footnotes, really nothing's changed that much, and what I typically will highlight is the capital asset roll forward and the debt. So in mine, it's page 56. I'm not sure what page it'll be. It's note 5. It'll say note 5 capital assets on that page.
Yeah, I'm going 138.
138, okay. So this shows you the beginning and ending balances and then the changes during the year in those capital assets. So you know, you had net improvements of about 23 million, 17 million if you net out the transfers, and then you've got depreciation expense of 8.7 million. This is the governmental activities. It just shows you the roll forward of capital assets, and then you'll see the same on the next page for the enterprise funds. And then the last footnote that I would highlight is the long-term debt, which is just 2 pages back from that, and it just shows you the changes during the year in long-term debt, along with future maturity schedule on the second page of the note that shows you how debt becomes due over the next several years. So everything else is fairly consistent year over year. You do have a small net pension liability, about $200,000, but it's not overly significant to the town as a whole. So any questions on any of that? Or is there anything else you want me to touch on?
Yeah, just one quick, and
Yeah.
not even a question, but just a point. I'm looking at page 27 of the CAFR itself, but at least for me, it's page 123 of 267. I'm not sure, sir, how that translates. It is the statement of revenues for proprietary funds?
Yep.
Change in net position?
I'm there.
And only in the storm drainage, it looks like, for whatever reason, the calculation of the
That was an
final
error.
position is just showing an error.
I think, yeah, it looked like a formula came out. So this hasn't gone through our final
Yeah.
internal
Yeah, just
QC
fine.
process. So yeah, it looks like the net position total hasn't carried down.
Yeah, it'd be about
It looks like it's
20 million,
right, but yeah.
Just wanted to point that out, because I know Dean will print up a bunch of nice copies of this for us.
Yeah, he doesn't have a signed version of it yet, so we'll make sure that gets fixed
Thank
before
you.
we get to the, so thank you for that.
Sure.
Anything else?
Perfect. Well, thank you, and I think the next item is to.
Yes.
Does that conclude the presentation? Or
Yes.
Dean, do you have any more, or are we moving on to the resolution then?
Resolution,
We're ready
please.
for the resolution? Okay. Item 2, resolution number 2019-44. A resolution accepting the audit report for 2018 prepared by Anton Collins Mitchell LLP, Certified Public Accountants. Legislative action, we had presentation from Mr. Moyer. Anything further you wish to add?
Are you talking to me or Randy?
To you.
Oh, okay. No, I just, we kind of covered it already. By adopting this, we will make that report final rather than draft. We will send it to the required authorities, you know, the state, USDA, people that hold notes for us, and as an annual reporting requirement, but we'll take care of all of that. So I would just recommend we approve the resolution as presented.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just one
Final
question to
questions?
Dean. I saw a reference to the Windsor Building Authority.
Yes.
Is that a functioning group right now, or what?
Yeah, we only meet once a year. I think our next meeting is November. There isn't too much to do just now. We go over the minutes from the last meeting, talk about the building, plan what we're going to do for the next year. But it is a functioning entity. It's just we only meet once a
And
year.
its main purpose is to?
That was
do
the vehicle we used to do the police station, to get the USDA loan. And the USDA loan goes out, I think the original term was 40 years. And I think that was 2009 that we got that loan. And one of their requirements is that we have the building authority meet at least once a year.
So is that the only thing you're overseeing at the moment?
With the
Is that
building, yes.
just the police station?
Police station,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Well, Mayor, I just want to add
Yes.
that I just want to commend Dean and his staff. I mean, I think you see with this audit, not only do we have great oversight and controls of the public's money, but really I think through the work of the board and staff, I think that we have a community that is prospering, right? I mean, we're adding to the fund balance, we're adding to the assets of the community, we're taking the investment that we get in from tax dollars, put that right back into our own assets, and I know we rely a lot on finance and Dean to make sure that all this money goes to where it needs to go and it's accounted for. So it's a tremendous amount of work that he and his staff do, and I think it's reflected well in this audit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And can you remind us, I think you have your Vicki Miller's replacement back there?
Yes.
Can you remind us of his name? So
His
we can
name
get
is-
to know, I mean, I'm sure we're going to see him quite frequently, especially
We
as
just
we
call him
enter
New
into
Vicky.
budget.
New Vicky.
So,
He did in fact replace Vicki Miller. This is Carl Gannon.
okay.
He started in March? Huh? Okay. So he hasn't been here that long, but he's doing a really good job. So.
Yeah, well, thank you again. You always give us a good, clean bill of health. So good to know that Windsor is on good, solid fiscal standing. And thank you again to our accountants who came in this evening and gave us the presentation. Moving on to item 3, ordinance number 2019.
So we gotta do the resolution.
Resolution, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Okay, is there a motion for resolution 2019-44?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, motion on the floor for Mr. Ennemeyer with a second for Mr. Baker approving resolution 2019-44. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 3, ordinance number 2019-1588. An ordinance amending the Windsor Municipal Code concerning renewal requirements for sales tax license and requirements for business licenses in the town of Windsor, Colorado. Second reading, legislative action. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam. As it says here in the memo, this is the second reading from the first reading on May 13th regarding business and sales tax licensing. I don't really have anything to add, but I guess being the second reading, we have to take public comment. Is that correct? So I don't really have anything to add. So.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Moyer? Is there anybody in the audience who wish to address the board on this agenda item? This would be the time to step forward. Okay. Seeing none, and if there's no further questions or comments from the board, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1588.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Wilson approving ordinance 2019-1588. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4, a public hearing, a conditional use grant extension for Highland Meadows Golf Course Subdivision 13th Filing, Lot 1, Power to Play Sports, temporary gravel parking. John Turner, Hillside Commercial Group, the applicant. Mike Walker, TB Group, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck will give presentation, and I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett approving to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now open. Mr. Sosowski?
Thank you, Mayor. Madam Mayor, for the record, I'd like to point out that I, in my capacity as town board liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting this past week during which this matter was previously presented. I wish to state that my participation in the Planning Commission proceedings has in no way influenced me in my capacity as a town board member this evening. I'll make my decision and cast my vote this evening based solely on the evidence presented during this public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hornbeck?
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. This conditional use grant request is for an extension to an existing CUG. The subject property is located on the northeast corner of Fairgrounds and Crooked Stick Drive, next to the Power to Play basketball facility. It is zoned general commercial, or GC. The site plan that was previously approved does depict the gravel parking area. The CUG expired March 27th of this year, so this is a request to extend that approval to allow construction of a permanent parking lot. The applicant has submitted a site plan that's currently under review by staff to develop the site with retail pad sites and a paved permanent parking lot. So there would be shared parking between those retail users and the Power to Play site. And I believe that site plan has been included as a communications item as well for your reference. At their June 5th, 2019 meeting, Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the conditional use grant application as presented with an expiration of December 31st, 2019. The applicant does anticipate beginning construction in August and hopefully wrapping up in August. However, we tried to build in a little window to the end of the year in case there's any unforeseen delays with that. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, any testimony received, and recommendation. The municipal code does list approval criteria for a conditional use grant, which this application does appear to comply with, and those are listed for you as well. The applicant is present, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay. Did the applicant have anything further you wanted to add at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Are there any questions from Town Board? Mr. Sosowski?
Yes, Mr. Hornbeck, so back in 2017 when the CUG was approved and it's allowed for temporary gravel parking, did it say because we expect you to replace it with a paved parking lot by 2019?
I believe that was the intent, is yes, that
Okay.
you had a 2-year window to get it paved, and they didn't quite meet that, obviously.
Was that because of something we were requesting that made it impossible to do during that 2-year window?
I don't believe so. You might wish to hear from the applicant why.
Yeah.
Do you wish to hear from the applicant, Mr. Sosowski?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious apparently there was a holdup, right, in the overall plan? Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Sure.
Sorry.
Good evening, John Turner, 6379 Crooked Stick, Windsor. Yes, we submitted the 16th filing, which is the commercial and the parking lot. We probably, I'm not sure the date we started. We probably started about a year, maybe a year and a quarter ago. We thought that was adequate time to get that through the process. There was an email that there was a staff change here, and there was a drop period where the project didn't progress. I did get an email saying, but that might have been a week, it might have been 3 weeks, I'm not sure, it might have been 2 months. I'm not sure. So, also, we were trying to coordinate the paving with the closing of the facility when they redo their courts, which is in August. So we're actually trying to push right now to get approval on the 16th filing to start work. So.
You know, I guess a little conflict between the success of the building and then the ability to pave.
Well, we're trying to coordinate it. There was questions from staff probably in the spring saying, what are you going to do with the traffic when you go under construction on the temporary parking lot? And so our solution was to build the parking lot when the facility was closed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess
They
so.
were trying to make sure we didn't go under construction while they were still holding tournaments that are scheduled weeks and months in advance. A lot of the events at that time of year are scheduled where people are traveling from out of state and stuff, they're at least regional events. So we didn't need to throw 200 cars scattered out throughout the site.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Any additional questions? I have a question for Mr. Hornbeck. When you were giving the presentation, you said there's going to be parking and pad sites put in there?
Yeah, retail pad sites for future.
So that's all, what we're seeing right now, all parking, that's not going to be the case. There's going to now be some pad sites, and they'll have to work the parking around that, is that correct?
So the site plan in the packet was for just showing the gravel. There's another site plan that, yes, does have retail, restaurant type uses. There would be shared parking. We have looked at the numbers, and they'd be providing additional parking. There's approximately 150 capacity in the gravel lot. They'd provide that plus the requirement for the
Plus whatever.
retail.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just was afraid that this was going to diminish what we're trying to achieve, and I want
Right.
clarification on that.
Yep, and that's not the case.
Okay. Okay, if there are no further questions from town board, is there anybody in the audience who wish to come before the board on this particular agenda item? This would be the time and opportunity. Seeing none, if there are no further questions from the board, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close public hearing.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Dr. Jones to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 5, conditional use grant extension for Highland Meadows Golf Course subdivision, 13th filing. Lot 1, Power to Play Sports, temporary gravel parking. John Turner, Hillside Commercial Group, applicant Mike Walker, TB Group, the applicant's representative. Anything further to add, Mr. Hornbeck?
Nothing further.
Anything further from town board? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the conditional use grant extension for the Highland Meadows Golf Course subdivision.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker, approving the conditional use grant extension. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the conditional use grant is approved unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, resolution number 2019-45. A resolution approving and adopting an intergovernmental agreement between Weld RE4 School District and the Town of Windsor for the School Resource Officer Program. Legislative action with presentation from Chief Clemick. Chief.
Madam Mayor, board members, this is basically a renewal of our SRO program we have. We have one SRO, and that'd be Officer Stanger with the high school. The school district asked to increase that to an additional SRO, so in the 2019-2020 year, we'll have 2 SROs. Officer Walker will be the second SRO in charge of the middle school and the grade schools. So we're just renewing our IGA with the school district and updating it to reflect 2 officers and to change the funding formula. It goes from a 70-30 to a 50-50 split for the cost of the SRO in the school districts. So, and if there's anything wrong with this plan, it's all my fault. If it's all right, it's Crystal made it right. So. Any questions, ma'am?
Any questions?
I have a question
Okay, Mr.
about
Baker.
the budget.
Do we have this in the budget for?
This is one of the officers we budget for at the beginning of the year.
Excellent.
What is that total cost, Chief, do you know?
For the SRO, I would say off the base officers at 60,000 plus, it's probably someplace in 83,000 per an officer,
So
divide
it's
that now.
about 40-some each
Yes.
side's going to contribute. Okay.
Approximately, yes.
And do we contribute half now for the high school officer?
Currently, we provide 70%, they provide 30%.
70.
So it's an increase in the split in our favor.
Okay, Mr. Kozlowski.
Yeah, Chief, I guess I thought there was one SRO in place at the school, and I thought the school was paying all of that first.
No, that's always, that program has always been a split, 70-30 split, yeah.
And so how that works out, Mr. Sislowski, is the schools are open for 225 days per year, which is really 60% of the school year.
Okay.
And so they've taken care of half that cost. We paid half. So it ends up being they pay 30% and the town pays 70%.
Right.
And so, and I want to thank the superintendent, Mr. Segmiller, because when we talked about adding a second officer, and I just said, you know, the town supports safety, we want the cops in schools too, but the 70-30 split is a little bit untenable to continue to carry it on. And so I thought he was really great and gracious in working with the town and getting to that 50-50 split. You know, just so that way, you know, I think that the community can continue to put police where they need to be, but, you know, not have any entity feeling like it's a financial burden.
Yeah, I did a lot of research before we had the contract, and there's a wide variety of funding formulas that are used across the state, from 100% on the part of the school district to 100% on part of the municipality.
Has the school board passed this resolution?
They will this coming Monday. So if this passes tonight, I'll get a copy of the resolutions to Sherry, and they'll take care of their vote.
Okay. Any further questions for Chief? If none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2019-45.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett approving resolution 2019-45. All in favor, vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 7, our financial report for April 2019. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam. I know we talked a lot about numbers tonight, so I'll try and be brief on this. As you mentioned, the report in your packet is for April 2019. This is also known as the Easter Bunny edition. We see we have pictures of the egg hunt we had at the rec center. For April.
Scary picture to me.
What's that?
That's kind of a scary picture. I like
Okay. Note to self, we won't use that one next year.
Oh, Mr. Hill, were you the one that dressed up? Yeah. Oh. You make a good bunny.
So at the end of April, your benchmark you wanted is 33% of your budget. And like most of the other months that we reported on this year, the revenue is ahead of that 33% and the expenditures are below it. Tax collections, sales and use tax collections are ahead of both the monthly requirement and the year-to-date requirement, and they also are higher than this time last year. And as I've mentioned a number of times, you can see the one graph in there that groceries and convenience stores are our biggest industry sector. As far as expenditures, the operating is at 26%, capital is at 7%, combined total of 17.6 as compared to the 33% benchmark. I say this every year too at this time of year. The operations will pick up here in the next few months as we open the pool, mowing the lawns, that type of thing. But as of now, they are right where they should be. Just looking ahead to the May report, Debbie gave me the sales tax preliminary sales tax numbers Friday in May is continuing the trend of outpacing last May. So we keep adding business licenses and places to shop. So I expect that trend to continue for some time. So that being said, I'd answer any questions, but that's my report for April.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Moyer? Mr. Baker?
I have one. Last month we talked on geocode,
Uh-huh.
and I asked about the brand's incentive, and I think you said this was a gross collection, and you would get us the net.
Oh, I clarified that. It is actually the net collection.
This is the net? So
Yes.
could you get us the gross of what it
Yes.
would have been?
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
I'll write it down. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Okay, Mr. Kozlowski?
Thank you. Mr. Moore, just on the category of that grocery, convenience, and gas stations,
Yes.
I mean, there's no local tax on the gas itself, right? I mean, are you talking about the convenience sort of store sale?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
'Cause the state gets tax on the gas and then shares it back to us on the highway users tax, I think it is.
Based on vehicle registrations and
Yes.
all that, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? Well, thank you for another good report.
Okay, thank you.
Communications from our town attorney.
I wanted to remind all of you that I will not be attending CML next week. I will be on vacation in an undisclosed location. For all of you.
Are you going to the bunker?
And so I will miss you next week, but I will return refreshed. That's all I've got this evening. Oh, and we have an executive session tonight.
Okay. Communications from town staff. Chief, anything further?
One thing I forgot to send this in the last weekly update, but the Well County Communications, Mike Wallace had contacted me, and they are moving forward with the tower site off of 14 and 15. They've got the new mast up, and so they're continuing work, and they're still on target to get it open as soon as possible.
Great. Mr. Moyer, did you have anything further?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, communications from our town manager.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow night we have our Transportation Master Plan open house at Windsor Fire Station number 1, and that is scheduled from 4 to 7:30.
Okay. Communications from town board. The only thing I have is this Saturday is another coffee with the mayor. This time, though, we are going to, for the first time, hosting at Raff's Tavern at Highland Meadows Golf Course, and hosting folks from Larimer County. So hopefully we will have a good and engaging conversation this Saturday, 7:30 to 9 a.m. And with that, I would seek a motion to go into the executive session.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4E and I, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect for certain economic development incentives, presented by Stacy Miller, our Director of Economic Development, and Jill Young, our Economic Development Specialist.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Ah, we have a tie. We have a motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a tied second from Dr. Jones and Miles Baker to move into executive session. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And we are going into executive session.
It just guarantees that there's at least 3 votes, is what it is.
No, let's just say mild.